Hi everyone, Chris Natzke here with Black Belt Leadership Speaking and Coaching with your Mind of a Champion Tip of the Week, live on Facebook. You know, I don't know about you, but it's coming to the end of the year here in 2019, and what I generally do at the end of each year is I take a look at what's happened in the past year and what I want to create with the upcoming year. And it always makes me think around this time of year about this idea that I've heard several times before about people on their deathbed. And what hospice workers in particular will share is that people on their deathbeds don't talk about the things they regret doing. They talk about the things they regret not doing, the chances they didn't take, the messages they didn't send, the conversations they didn't have. And so I guess today what I want to do is talk about this idea of what can we do in this upcoming year? What can we do to prepare ourselves for this upcoming year so that we can move into life really living the best life we can, really feeling the richness of life and taking the risks. And like the old adage says, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Now, this is a question that's often asked in the life coaching arena. I've certainly asked it to my clients. I've certainly had it asked of myself. But I really want you to think about that right now. What would you embark upon in this new year if you knew you couldn't fail? And what's held you back up until now? And I really think that oftentimes it's not about the true facts. It's about the stories we're creating in our mind about failure. In fact, I'm always also impressed with this study. My good friend Craig Zablocki talks about this in his speeches. There was a study that was done several years ago by NASA where they were taking a look at the creative potential of children. And what they did is they brought 1,600 subjects together, and they found that 98% of 4 and 5-year-olds rated out as creative geniuses. Let me say that again. 98% of 4 and 5-year-olds rated out as creative geniuses. But when they took the test 5 years later, what they found is only 30% of those subjects rated as creative geniuses. 5 years after that, the number dipped down to 12%. And by the time these subjects were adults, only 2% rated out as creative geniuses. So what happened along the way? Obviously, it was the baggage that they had taken on about and the belief systems that they weren't creative. They didn't have the potential to do whatever they dreamed about. And I think we do the same thing. And so this new year, I'm challenging all of us. In fact, I'm definitely challenging myself is what could I do? What would I embark upon this year if I knew I couldn't fail? And so I've got 4 ideas for us to really think differently this year so that we can create the lives that we want for 2020 and beyond. So here's the first one. Number one is think big. And what do I mean by that? Well, BIG is an acronym, but and it stands for being bold in terms of what our thoughts are and what our visions are, being imaginative in the actions that we can take, and then also focus on giving to others with our gifts. And what I'm challenging all of us to do, and I'll be doing this in a couple days, is take some time before the beginning of the year just to be quiet and dream. Vision. Ask yourself the question, what would I really like to create this year? And have it be void of any of the limitations you might think would come in your way. Money, time, anything that you've made excuses about in the past. Make sure that you just take those away and just dream and see what comes forward. My guess is that when you go through that process, there's going to be things that bubble up that maybe you've pressed down. I know that's the case usually is with me, but you've pressed down for quite some time just because you didn't think it was practical. But go for it. Just what do you got to lose? If nothing else, you spend an hour having some fun. Number 2 is surround yourself with big people. And this kind of goes along with what I was just sharing, but surround yourself with people that are thinking big as well. And thinking big doesn't need to be massive amounts of money and huge action that they take. It just could be really living life to the fullest in what they want to create in their life. And I'm just reminded of about 4 or 5 years ago, I took a trip and I walked what's called the Camino de Santiago. It's a 500-mile walk across northern Spain. Had been something I'd been dreaming about doing for 15 years, but felt I never had the time, the money, all that stuff to make it happen. And I was out to lunch with one of my good buddies, Stephen Katz. So Stephen, if you're watching this, thank you, my brother. And so anyway, he was talking about his bucket list and all the things he wanted to do in the next year and beyond. And then he asked me what was on my bucket list. Well, one of the things he had said is he wanted to climb Kilimanjaro that year. And he said, what about that walk you've always talked about? I said, yeah, I've always wanted to do the Camino. He goes, why don't you do it? I said, sure, I'll do it one day. He said, no, why don't you do it this year? Now keep in mind, this was in mid-February. And he just wouldn't let me back off of that. So I committed to do some research. One thing led to another. And on May 4th, I was walking up the side of the Pyrenees Mountains in France on my journey. So surround yourself with people that think big. The next is that reframe the failures that you've had in the past. Because many times we have failures, but they're rich in learning. And I can almost guarantee that the times in your life that you've had difficulty and struggle are the times that you remember the most. And when you've overcome those, or even if you haven't, those are the times you're probably most proud in your life that you really dug in deep. And so what are the nuggets that you can pull from the areas of your life where maybe things didn't go as well as they could have, but then what you did is you turned that into something positive to get where you want to go. And then the final thing is choose at least one thing that frightens you. And I'm speaking to myself right now. I don't know what that is going to be yet for me this year, but choose at least one thing that frightens you and start taking some action against that. Because what we know is as I said at the beginning of this, is many people don't regret the things they did, they regret the things they didn't do. And how many times in your life have you chosen not to undertake something and it's still bothering you? Man, I wish I would have taken that job, or I wish I would have asked that woman out or that guy out, or whatever. Whatever that is for you, where have you had that? And let's not let that happen again. Choose something that frightens you this year and go for it, whatever that is, however big or however small that is. So that's what I've got for you this year in terms of thinking big so you can create the life that you want. And if you're really looking at taking a process through this, just go ahead and check below, because I've got a link in there to a process that I've been doing for years that I call the 7 questions to ask yourself to create an amazing year. So if you download that, that'll help you through this process. But I just want you to know that I'm up for it this year to make 2020 the best that I've had so far. I hope you are too, but it's just going to take some courage and some action on our part. So this has been Chris Natzke from Black Belt Leadership Speaking and Coaching. If you enjoyed this, please make sure you comment, like it, and share. And I'll see you next time on the Mind of a Champion Tip of the Week.